Thanks for coming, Bill. Been really looking forward to this. Thanks for everybody else for coming as well. It's really exciting. We get started. So Barbarian Days chronicles your lifelong passion for surfing the world for incredible waves. And taking you, let me start that again. As a journalist, what's it like to write a memoir and in which you need to investigate your own memories in the past?
Yeah, that's a good question. Before I try to answer it, let me also thank Aspen Words and Aspen Institute for having me here. Because it's a good question because there's such different. Memoir is such a strange genre for a journalist, because you end up sort of reporting out your own past and investigating your own memories, and it's focus on yourself. In journalism, you're basically writing about other people's problems, at least in the stuff I do, and there's also the sort of ethics of it, because this is private life we're talking about. Everything was off the record, so to speak. I normally work as a journalist here. I'm Bill. I'm from the New Yorker, and people know it's on the record. And just sort of arrogate to yourself the right to write about, tell the world about, publish all these shared moments with loved ones and family and friends, frenemies, is a dicey thing to do, and you end up having to negotiate, do a lot of fact checking and negotiating with people over what they remember as opposed to what you remember. So it was a long process. It took me 20 years to write this book.
That's amazing. How did you decide what to put in and what to leave out on that note?
Yeah, those are exactly the questions you're always asking yourself. Whether you have the right, will this embarrass somebody? Will somebody hate this? And do you have the right to publish it or not? And it's so many things come into it. How do you feel about them? And then people surprise you too. I go to some people and think they're never going to let me write about this. Can I write about what your dad used to do? And the answer is going to be no. Then they surprise you, and then they're proud of. Or proud of their rowdy past, you never know. And other people sort of panic when you say, so I'm just going to talk about this part. No, I never told my kids about that, a lot of that. And then really, actually there was for the British publication, British edition, the UK libel laws are a lot stronger than ours. And I had a lawyer there sort of jump up, make me go back to people, we're not going to publish this, it could be libelous, and this, and I had to go back and do a little more of this. And I remember they made me go talk to someone whom I had described. I said her life seemed to be one long middle-aged orgy. This is when I was a kid. I was going out with her daughter, and I thought, But I went to her and she's in California and brought this up, and she said, "You wrote about that? You put that in a book? That is great." She was just, she's like 89 now, and that's how she apparently wanted to be remembered.
That's fantastic. That's funny. You want to do a short bit of reading from the book?
Yeah, I would like to. We didn't know how to gracefully work this in, so we'll try. This is just a sort of short passage. It's this book, as some of you I know read it, but is sort of the story of my life told largely through surfing. And this is just a little passage from the first chapter. When I was living in Hawaii, we'd moved there not Hawaii 5-0, we moved there earlier. My father got a job over there. And I was a little surfer, and I've been surfing for a few years when we moved there, so it was a great thing for me. And the only thing one would need to know to understand this, I think, is that I actually, during the writing of this book, got out of the blue a box of letters that I had written to my best friend back on the mainland when we moved to Hawaii. There's a reference to those. And here they were, 40 years later, and they were really rich. They're the backbone of the first chapter of this book. So that comes up in this, just a couple of paragraphs. Okay. But surfing always had this horizon, this fear line that made it different from other things, certainly from other sports I knew. You could do it with friends, but when the waves got big or you got into trouble, there never seemed to be anyone around. Everything out there was disturbingly interlaced with everything else. Waves were the playing field. They were the goal. They were the object of your deepest desire and adoration. At the same time, they were your adversary, your nemesis, even your mortal enemy. The surf was your refuge, your happy hiding place, but it was also a hostile wilderness, a dynamic, indifferent world. At 13, I had mostly stopped believing in God, but that was a new development, and it had left a hole in my world, a feeling that I'd been abandoned. The ocean was like an uncaring God, endlessly dangerous, power beyond measure. And yet you were expected, even as a kid, to take its measure every day. You were required, this was essential, a matter of survival, to know your limits, both physical and emotional. But how could you know your limits unless you tested them? And if you failed the test? You were also required to stay calm if things went wrong. Panic was the first step, everybody said, to drowning. As a kid, too, your abilities were assumed to be growing. What was unthinkable one year became thinkable, possibly, the next. My letters from Honolulu in 1966 are less distinguished by swaggering bullshit than by frank discussions of fear. Don't think I've suddenly gotten brave. I haven't. But the frontiers of the thinkable were quietly, fitfully edging back for me. Thank you.
It's interesting to sit here and be transported completely off the stage when you're reading that. Thank you. Is Barbarian Days the book you set out to write, or did you have a different vision for it in the beginning?
I had a very different idea from what it ended up with. I had a kind of muddled. I sort of backed into it through a piece I wrote for the New Yorker about a guy who used to surf with an Ocean Beach, and my publisher wanted to bring that as a book, and I didn't want to. And then I started thinking of this book I might write, a bunch of sort of set pieces, really stylized. I mean, each chapter would be about a break, a surf spot where I'd spent a lot of time, and about the person, the friend who I'd surfed it with. I was sort of only interested in writing about places I'd shared with somebody, not places I'd surfed by myself or where I hadn't had friends, because it's an intense sort of crucible for friendship I've found surfing. So it was a series of, it was this kind of hyper masculine idea. It was all guys and really not a good idea for a book, I realized after some years of working on it. And what really, I mean, there was a fourth chapter where I dropped out of college to live on Maui and surf a particular wave there. I went with my then girlfriend, and she just completely took over the chapter. Like, she was so much more interesting than any of the guys I was surfing with. So that ended that version. And slowly it got, there were sort of more girls allowed, and it got sort of richer, and I left behind that conception.
What part of the book was the most fun to write?
I think probably there's a long surf trip in the middle of the book. I was gone 3 or 4 years, 3.5 years, and in the just it's the kind of endless summer idea, travel the world looking for waves, and in the first section of that, in the South Pacific, we were in the South Pacific, and we found some pretty good waves in Samoa and Tonga and here and there, and in Fiji. But then we found this incredible wave in West Fiji, breaking off an uninhabited island, and it was, a couple guys had surfed it before us, but we, it was a well-kept secret, and we sort of got the treasure map from this guy who didn't want to give it to us, but we got an idea of where it was and saw it from a mountainside on a bigger island, and got out there and got some fishermen to drop us off. There was no fresh water on the island, so it was a kind of the fishermen had to come back regularly with supplies, and we were there quite a few weeks, and it was this amazing wave. I mean, both of us, I was with my friend Brian DeSalvatore, whom I met on Maui, and both of us thought it was probably the best wave we'd ever surfed in our lives. And we did with just the two of us out there. And so writing about this little island called Tavarua, later the secret got out and it's now famous and crowded, and has a resort on it. But writing about Tavarua, and I had a lot in my journals, and I got some letters returned, so I had a lot of material that way, but I also just, it was such rich stuff, and I know I couldn't write, 100 pages about it, but just to be able to choose the details and just to sort of relive that period, which had its, I mean, there were long flat spells and felt like you were losing your mind just laying out on this desert island, turning into like a New Yorker cartoon of the desert island. That was us, the two characters out there. We'd see a ship go by. I bet they have chairs. Think they have chairs? I bet they definitely have chairs. There's like a shipping channel not too far away. But that stuff was funny in retrospect, and then just to think hard about the waves. And I think it's in that little section that I probably really bear down and describe waves in more detail than I do anywhere else in the book. There was a tremendous variety, but such exceptional quality and the sense of surf fate, of just paddling over a first wave of a set and just seeing a set going forever, and it's just us, and kind of like I would short out. I mean, I grew up with crowds in California and Hawaii. I would start to have like a nervous breakdown out there. But just remembering that and being able to write about it was pure pleasure.
There was my wife and I, excuse me, had our honeymoon on Namotu, the island just next to Tavarua, and that section when you talked about the sun overhead and the wave disappeared and you could see right through it, and that we had experienced that. It's really, really unusual to be on a wave and you can't see it. It's like there's no wave and it's just glass right here.
That was a really small day when this weird effect happened, and so you could only see reef, and you're just kind of riding like surfing at night. You're just riding by feel because it's just reef. The water's so clear. It just lasted maybe half an hour. Yeah. And then I'd like crouch down low to be able to, oh, there's the wave,
Yeah.
It's only about this big.
It's such a weird phenomenon. Why do you think Barbarian Days has struck a chord with surfers and non-surfers?
Well, it's written for the general reader, not most people, of course, don't surf. I don't know, it's quite a trick, to write about something like surfing, which has its own almost dialect, its own language, it's all this technical jargon that goes with, waves and writing them, and how to like get that across to people who don't know that language. So there's a lot of sort of working with that. I'd ask my wife to read, who's not interested in surfing at all, to read chapters and flag anything that she didn't understand, if there was like surf stuff or ocean stuff, and so she would flag things, and that was really helpful. All of a sudden it was incredibly annoying. I mean, just, channel. I don't know what that is. That's not even a surfing term, channel, deep water, boats, come on. I don't know what it means. It's all right. Channel, place where deep water, no waves break, But that trick, of sort of conveying, and eventually, I mean, I tried to structure it so that people just have to hear these terms once, and I don't, do it again and define them again, and there's no glossary or anything like that. And by, I don't know, maybe halfway through the book, in the surfing scenes, I just kind of let it rip. I just tell the story as I would tell the story, not in heavy tribal dialect, but in surf talk. And I think readers got kind of get a kick out of that. Like, now I know what this means. I can picture this. But more generally, there's a lot of stuff besides surfing in the book, but it opens up this world that's not at all what it looks like from the outside, and it's kind of from the inside, where I've just spent this ridiculous amount of my life, chasing waves, and And other surfers, a lot of them, I think, get a kick out of it because, hey, this is our world. You know, they know the people, they know the places. It's our world sort of being opened out to everybody else. I think the documentary Endless Summer in the 60s was a big sort of crossover. You know, it didn't really convey a great deal about surfing, and it wasn't really a documentary. Big mistake we made. You know, we were gonna do like they did in Endless Summer. Those guys, except those guys were like, they weren't actors, but they were like hired for a 6-week photo shoot. They didn't like throw away their lives for years. So we had that a little wrong. But that was, again, people felt like they were, we're in this kind of good-looking world that we don't know anything about. And so there was some of that. And some people who read it are interested in, like, there's a lot of surfing in there, but I like the stuff about your family, you know, I mean, it's different readers, different tastes.
Two-part question. How has surfing changed since you started? And then could a young surfer go out and do what you set out to do those decades ago?
Well, it's got a lot more crowded. Yeah, sure. You can still look for, waves out on the margins and in hard-to-reach places. I think there are a lot of waves out there. You have to be really patient, and there are more tools now to look. I mean, we used to, like in the South Pacific, we were just using nautical maps, navigation maps that yachts and ships used, trying to figure out where on some island, some coast, it might all come together. And it was hopeless. I mean, it was always wrong. It's got to be here. The trade winds are there, and you'd get there, and these rocks that aren't even on the map, and whatever it was, we could never get very far. Or after the fact, you'd find a good wave, and then you look at the chart and think, yeah, of course, but never got there with the charts. And so you can do that kind of wave searching maybe more efficiently now, but it still takes endless patience. No place, no great wave breaks all the time. In fact, most great waves break only occasionally. And so you have to have a sense of it or get lucky, and you got to wait on it, and which is all kind of uncomfortable depending on where it is. So yeah, you could do that kind of trip now, and I think there are a lot of surf bums out there looking for waves still. But it's the sort of exploding popularity of surfing is one of the reasons, of course, people travel to the back and beyond to find waves, because it's so crowded at the known spots. And it's really a problem, and I don't know what's to be done about it. I worry that with this book I might have contributed to the people have said, you're contributing to the popularity of surfing. But it's never people who read the book. People read the book and say, and this isn't everybody, of course, but I've had many times the reaction, I thought I might want to surf, but then I read your book. I really don't think it encouraged a single person to take up surfing.
Just so everybody knows, surfing sucks. Don't try it. Yeah.
I think there are a bunch of surfers here, actually.
On that note, what do you think about man-made waves, like the Kelly Slater's Wave Park and the other ones?
Yeah, I have a very mixed reaction. I mean, there've been wave pools, for decades, churning out waves you wouldn't want to ride, and then a couple of years ago, Kelly Slater, this great surfer, had been developing this wave pool in Central California, and it's quantum. It's just worlds away from what we've seen before. It's this incredible wave. In fact, people sometimes ask me, what's the perfect wave, and the answer has always been, there is no perfect wave. There's no such thing. It's a kind of phrase that is meaningless in the ocean, but this is the perfect wave. I mean, it's a machine makes it, and it just comes out the same every time, and so it's a terrible kind of philosophical, like sort of Rubicon for surfing. Like now there's this, and a friend of mine who writes a lot about surfing, Matt Warshaw, says surfing history. He's written the history of surfing. He says surfing history will be before Kelly's wave and after Kelly's wave. Now that's it. And I don't know if it'll be that profound, but it's quite as a surfer, you immediately want to surf it, Do I know Kelly Slater? How can I get an invitation? Because it's not been open to the public. But eventually there'll be a lot of them. It's not surfing because it's you stand on a board and kick around on something, this beautiful wave thing, but the surfing itself is so much the search for waves, trying to get good waves, or just at your local spot, trying to understand it at a level, the long, long days and years you spend studying the ocean and studying your spot even, until you know every rock and every angle and at every tide, every wind condition, to be able to get good waves. That's this whole crazy thing we're doing all the time. And this just eliminates that. You go sit here, wave pops up, you're up next, and you pay your money. It's just, so it's a different thing. And it's ironic that Kelly Slater should have come up with it because, he's this brilliant, brilliant surfer, perhaps the greatest surfer ever. And what it is with great surfers, and particularly with Kelly, surfers watch video of them, and it's okay, it's they're great athletes, but what really, really sets off someone like him or John Florence, the current world champion, is some knowledge, some understanding of waves. How did he know that? How could he possibly have known from that position what the wave was going to do? It's like no one else in the world could have, and that's why his hand went this way, and that's why he stood up at that, and it's like nobody else understands a wave. And Kelly Slater just epitomizes that, just an understanding that surpasses anybody else's. And then he creates this thing, which, there's nothing to, you, I guess, learn how to ride it. And I'm told by friends, I haven't ridden it, but friends who have, that it's just pure panic. You've never been so scared about blowing it. This is your one chance. It takes the pool a long time to settle down, and you get invited, and you get like 2 waves, and if you blow 2 takeoffs, go home, and everybody sees it on video. And
no pressure.
They say the pressure is ridiculous. But I have mixed feelings. I want to surf it, and I deplore it,
Yeah. What about surfing becoming an Olympic sport?
Ugh. Yeah, you can imagine how I feel about that. It's just, it is actually, it's going to be in the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. And there's a guy, I've written a little bit about him in it, an opinion piece in the New York Times a couple years ago, just deploring the whole enterprise, who kind of single-handedly got surfing admitted to, it's a whole bunch of hoops you need to jump through to get surfing, to get a sport considered for the Olympics, and he jumped through all of them over many years, and created surfing federations in Nepal and Finland, anywhere, and there's like you got to have 100 national federations. It's sort of a big hustle to get it in there, but I don't know. The reason I'm not pleased about it because it really will increase the popularity of surfing, which is selfishly one I just don't want. And contest surfing is a kind of abstraction of surfing and an alienation of the thing that is interesting to me and most surfers. I think it's hard to take your eyes off some of these guys when they're in great waves and great surfers and all that. But 95, 99, I don't know, virtually all surfers surf their lives, nothing to do with contests. A lot of surfers have never seen a contest. They're really over at the edge of surfing in most parts of the world.
Is there any place that you haven't surfed that you'd like to surf?
Well, the way it works, once a wave is known, a great wave, it gets crowded, no matter where it is. So there are great waves I haven't surfed, but I don't want to surf because they're crowded. But then there are ones I kind of suspect, like there was a wave in Ponape, which used to be part of the U.S. Trust territories. I went there looking for waves in the 70s and didn't find any, but there turned out to be a great, great wave there, and only a few people knew about it, and I was very keen on that. But then it blew up in the magazines before I got there, and pros are there on every swell. So I have a couple of places, but I don't know where they are. There's a wave in Ghana, for instance, that I really, really want to surf, but I don't know exactly where it is, which is why it's not crowded, because nobody's quite sure where it is, but we've seen a little video.
Who's the best surfer you've ever surfed with?
I've surfed with Slater. He's pretty good. And plenty of guys who are, great surfers. In fact, last winter I was on the North Shore of Oahu, and they're getting ready for the Pipe Masters. This is the last contest of the World Tour, big contest. And I paddled out at a place called Velziland up the coast, and the contest was on that afternoon, I guess. And all 4 of the top 10 pros paddled out. Made it kind of hard to get waves. So I've been around these top guys, but the thing that stands out to me, the one experience that stands out to me, once in Fiji, that island I mentioned, turned out to have there's this incredible wave on the island, but it's pretty fickle. But there's an outer reef, it's like a mile and a half out. We never knew it was out there, but there's a great wave out there, very different, not so precise, but a bigger, sort of beefier, shiftier wave, and it's now called Cloudbreak. And I started surfing as a resort guest in middle age when I could finally afford it, and got over the kind of disappointment of the resort being built. Anyway, I started going there and surfing Cloudbreak a lot, and I surfed Cloudbreak on a big day once with a guy named Shane Dorian, who's another sort of famous surfer, and it was scary and kind of out of control, and there were 2 other pros, but kind of lesser pros, and me and Dorian, and the 3 of us weren't getting any waves. We were just dodging waves. I really shouldn't have been out there, just trying to survive. And Dorian just put on this clinic. He was just treating it like a little beach break, these thick, monstrous, incredible waves on his backhand. And it was so beautiful. I'd never seen a display of surfing up close like that. So that was a sort of peak moment with a great surfer.
That sounds incredible. What can surfers do to protect the places they love to surf?
Well, there are a lot of threats. There's a group called the Surfrider Foundation, sometimes do stuff with, and they fight, coastal development and offshore drilling being proposed now, and a lot of other threats to just coastal ecology in general. They're a good organization for that in this country. In fact, they're international. But surf spots come and go, for natural reasons as well as, sort of human caused reasons. Storms will rearrange a surf spot, earthquakes, just the pattern of at a river mouth of the silt coming out will erase a great wave. They change the dredging pattern at a wave in Australia. One of the great waves that I write about in my book is gone because of that. And a great wave in Madeira called Jardim do Mar. That was one of the beautiful, one of the best, maybe the best big wave point break in the world. And they built this horrible, huge seawall, destroying the wave. Absolutely unneeded, just a kind of make-work project, just a boondoggle. Local corrupt politicians and contractors. And that was fought. Surfers from all over, and local surfers too, were, trying to stop that thing, but it got built and destroyed the wave. There's a lot of, and there were a lot of other bad projects in Madeira, really disrupting the coastal ecology. So it's a constant struggle.
What's it like being a journalist in an era where the free press and the First Amendment are under attack by the present administration?
There's a little gear shift there.
Yeah. The wind came up, the tide shifted, and the waves just got a little bigger.
Yeah, it's on. It's. Well, I couldn't say it's bad for journalists, if that's what you mean. What's it like being a journalist in this particular period, the Trump era? I think it's bad for the country. The sort of demonization of the press. All politicians and presidents have had their problems with the press, but they sort of vent privately about that. This guy is just turned the press, the media, into this fixed hate object, and is really determined. The press constrains power. It holds leaders and president's accountable. And he hates that, obviously, and seems not to understand or at least value in any way the role the press plays in a democratic society. And so it's a full, toxic, constant attack. And it's appalling, but it really gets your blood going, and I feel like we're all working harder and in some ways doing better work under this particular pressure. But you can't, I write a lot of editorials, denouncing different things out of this White House, but you can't let yourself as a journalist, as a reporter, get into this war that Trump very much wants. Obviously not with the whole press, but he's got his favored news outlets who are like Fox News, et cetera, that are basically the public relations for this administration at this point. But the whole rest of the press, he's really, really taken a position that, he's called the media the enemy of the people. I don't know if everybody picked up on that one. That was a Steve Bannon phrase that Trump started using. That was Stalin's phrase for the, people you needed to liquidate. It's a really ominous kind of thing to be saying. So it's intense in that way, but you can't take the bait. We can't go to war like Trump's after us, so we got to be anti-Trump. No, we got to do our work, which does include investigating stories that he hates us working on and trying to hold power accountable. But it's a lose-lose really for us to get into that too much. And I think the big papers, the main sort of news organizations are doing a pretty good job of trying to play it straight. If writers, editors feel like what Trump is doing is really appalling and a genuine threat to American institutions. These attacks on, because after, by attacking the press with the intensity he has, trying to destroy it as an institution. He's going after a whole bunch of institutions. The judiciary, federal law enforcement, and he's just always punching down. It's bad stuff, but we have to, I think, try to sort of keep our cool and just do our work and not get things wrong, and make good judgments, and as opposed to kind of embattled, hysterical judgments. And it's been good for business. Our subscriptions are way up, and I think it's true at the New York Times. The Washington Post is absolutely revived. It was, Walking Dead, and now it's a great paper again.
Do you have a favorite story that you've reported for The New Yorker?
I get to do a lot of different stuff for The New Yorker. I do a lot of international reporting and, broadly speaking, politics, very broadly defined. But I can just sort of pick up things, and if the editors agree, I can do them. The story that occurs to me when you ask that is a funny thing I did. I was on a jury and a subway mugging case, and when it was over, we convicted the guy, and I ran into one of his alibi witnesses after watching his sentencing, and she recognized me in the elevator leaving the courtroom, and she started cussing me out, and how we'd railroaded him, we got it all wrong, and so on. And so we started talking about it, and then she really surprised me. She said, I was going to be a lawyer, but this was so disgusting. I'm not going to be a lawyer. And I said, you were going to be a lawyer, because there's a lot of kind of stereotyping that goes on in jury deliberations, it turns out, which I tried to resist, but she was not going to be a lawyer in our story, we told ourselves. She was this sort of street kid. But it turned out both her parents were lawyers and both her sisters were lawyers, and I said, wait, can we talk a little bit? And we started talking, and I began to get this other version of this story we've been hearing in court that was completely different. And the more I heard, the less I thought we'd got it right by convicting. And why didn't you say any of this stuff in court? He wouldn't let us. The defendant would have been embarrassed if, so. And so I went and reported it out. At first I was a juror, and then I was the journalist, and discovered all this bad stuff the cops had done and so on. I loved doing that story. It was so fun. and I thought it came out well. It's always going to be a movie, but it's called Doubt, but it's never become a movie. But that was a fun one. I got to sleep at home at night. I didn't have to go to Venezuela.
Wow. So we have a little time for some question and answers. Is anybody? Oh, we got one right here.
I think she's bringing you a mic.
Oh, sorry, microphone coming. Yes.
Thank you. If you were mentoring young kids, say high school kids or college, and you were talking to them about pursuing a passion like surfing, how would you talk to them about that? And in particular, the relationship between that and maybe other productive avenues in life?
It's. I didn't hear the last part. It's quite amazing how you guys respond to this general issue. Like, shall you be a surf bum or shall you, like, contribute to society? I mean, that was that's in a way, the sort of fundamental issue in the middle of this book, this memoir, is these two different impulses in me, and it's civilization or society, and being a citizen in the ancient sense versus being a barbarian, sort of living by nature, gods, and this other life that doesn't accumulate and doesn't contribute but just lives, and it's played with various ways in this book. But most people don't. I mean, they aren't that interested in that. Oh yeah. But this whole crowd, yeah, that's it. And everybody laughs, and so that comes together here. Maybe not around surfing, maybe around skiing, and other outdoor obsessions. I don't know. I mean, I had to find my way through it, and spent most of my 20s chasing waves and working odd jobs, not writing for a living. I started freelancing, I guess, in my very late 20s, and kind of found something I loved doing and felt like I was contributing something and could make a living. And I think a lot of people have to go through that. And if you just cut it short and sort of cut to the chase of I got to go to law school now, or I've got to start this kind of work I'm always going to do now, you end up with regrets that and we're talking about kids of relative privilege in this case, but for every single person it's different. I mean, I know plenty of guys who went too far with surfing, and people with talent and plenty to offer just kept chasing waves and found themselves sort of in a dead end, career-wise or in life. And so where to find that balance, if you've got something that just sort of takes you outdoors and profits nobody and is completely it's completely useless to society. I think in skiing, actually, there are a lot. Ski instructors, skiers, there's a big business around it, much more so than with surfing. Now there are surf schools, I guess, it's like each person I have had a few interns, and including a guy who was a really talented writer, but he thought writing looked like too insecure a life, and then he moved to Colorado and was building bikes, and that was the thing he loved to do, was build these custom bicycles. Okay, that's what he's going to do. Next thing I knew, he wanted a reference to Stanford Law School, and now he's a crusading lawyer in the South. And I've known other people, same thing. You have to do that thing you love to the point that you can relax and do something else. That doesn't help much, I know. It really is case by case.
I like that answer. Right over here.
For you specifically, as you look back on the road you traveled and chose in your life, what changes would you have made philosophically or physically? And if you could do it again, are there paths of wisdom that you've now come to grips with that you regret or enjoy? How do you feel about it? Not for others, but for you.
That's a wonderful question. I don't know if I have a ready answer. I made a long sort of roundabout trip to being a journalist. You know, I didn't go to J school. I didn't, you know, I've never worked on a newspaper. I didn't sort of work my way up. I started freelancing at a certain point. And then New York was the only job I've ever had in journalism or in publishing. I'm actually now working on a story about the time when I was an undergraduate in California, which I skip over in this book. I kind of hop over it. I just found my journals so silly and unreadable from that period. I didn't want to go into it. I could only write about myself with so much disdain that it was going to really kind of taint the book. And I mean, there's plenty of that in here, but it would have been more. So I'm actually now working on something autobiographical from that period, and not getting very far. I mean, I do find myself from that period, or at least the way I wrote in my journals, and kind of self-tormented and thought kind of appalling. But I apparently had to do that to get from where I was earlier, very romantic reader of, you know, Kerouac and later James Joyce and the writers I loved, and to get to the more kind of to literary nonfiction, where I've been quite happy and where I feel like I belonged all along. But there was a lot of stuff I hadn't read that I read in due time, sort of came along at the right time later. Sometime in my 20s, I got onto something else that really worked for me. And with me, it's less sort of philosophical choices than lives not led, you know, and like working on a book like this, you really see right there, you know. If we hadn't got that abortion, my life would have, you know, been completely different and gone that way, and maybe I would have been a better person and more useful, or maybe I needed this bad thing to happen, which happened. And I like that I sort of moved into the world of news and real events, and didn't stay stuck in the kind of literary whirlpool I was in graduate school as well. You know, I was in this kind of small world of real self-obsession. So with me, it's been work that moved me from self-obsession to, as I said earlier, sort of other people's problems and getting out in the world and studying it. And that worked for me. I write a fair bit in here about being raised Catholic and losing that, and then surfing kind of filling that void for me, and without my realizing it. You know, so much of it's unconscious, these kind of orientations that are fundamental. I mean, you know that you always want to surf, that's all you want to do, but like I never used to think about surfing. It was just this thing I did. You know, I thought of myself as a writer, and that was in the background, surfing. And now I see it as a sort of steel thread through my life. I've always been doing this thing, and only, you know, relatively late started thinking about it. So that it certainly represents a kind of, not philosophical, but a kind of deep involvement with the ocean and with that small world of trying to find this beauty that I don't renounce. I mean, I did start to feel like I got to get away from that. I moved to New York, but then I found good waves in New York, and I'm missing some tomorrow morning. So I don't know, these bits and pieces, but I've got a lot sort of drier, I would say, in my view of things, more materialistic perhaps. Although I used to be much more vulgar Marxist than I am now, so I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I listened to your book on audio tape and greatly enjoyed that. You're such an avid reader, and there are many references to, how much you read in your memoir when you were younger, coming of age as a writer. Did you struggle at all with putting a book onto audio tape? And what can you talk about your decision? Most authors don't narrate their own audio, and did anybody try to talk you out of that? And can you talk a little bit about the audio process? It's not very old school, and I wondered about that.
Yeah, I didn't. Most writers are making the right decision, not reading their own books. I was sort of at, Audible.com is going to record it. Do you want to read it? Sure. And it sounded. I just thought it would be quick and easy, and they paid me something, and it seemed like quick, easy money, and it wasn't. It was brutal, and it was strange. But I think I had an instinct when they asked, it's either you or an actor. I've had other books read by actors, and I can't really listen to them because they don't know the world I'm writing about. They mispronounce stuff. It's not like you meet the person and collaborate with them. It just comes out, and I've never even listened to this one I did. But the funny thing is that, but I thought when the first question was first posed, there's a lot of surfing in this book, and a non-surfer is never going to get, if they get the pronunciations right, that's one thing, but they'll never get the point of a sentence, the long sentence, where the emphasis lands, because they won't be able to picture this stuff. They won't, and I thought nobody else can do this, maybe another surfer, but I thought, yes, I better do it. So I went to do it, which was some little studio in Midtown Manhattan, and it was horrible. The box they put me in was like just stand-up box, like a coffin, stood up, and there was no room at all, and there was nobody directed me, nobody said, another take, give it a little more, nothing like that. It's just first draft, and except that there was an engineer there who, I was just trying to speak the words and not mispronounce things and not waste time and tape, but it was like 40 hours in this box. Took days and days. And every now and then I'd try to get past, and I would come across words I couldn't pronounce, in fact. I've been reading them and writing them all my life. I don't know how to say this. A bunch of those. And I'd stop and ask the guy, what he said, hey, I'm Mexican. You're on your own, But he was a nice guy, but he would, when I'd make the real effort to stop thinking about just, not tripping on words, and get into it, inevitably he'd say, stop, what are you doing in there? What do you mean? What are you rustling? What's the there's too much noise in there. And I was like moving my hands. I'd started to get into it. Okay, back to, just trying to not miss. So I thought it was like terrible, but I haven't listened to it. But various people listened to it and said, good job, you really got into it. But I'm glad you listened to it. And that's how it went.
Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, do we have time for another?
Yeah, more questions.
Let's do one more.
You're going to shout over the microphone?
Oops, sorry. I was amazed with the incredible variety of language that you used to describe water, which was even more than we use to describe snow here. But one thing that was missing for me was a marine life, that with all the time spent in the water, I didn't hear too much about the animal life, and I was wondering if that's a conscious choice or if you didn't have those experiences I was imagining.
Not so much a conscious choice, but lots of, encounters. A seal tried to bite me, a crab did bite me, and there's lots of, things happen when you're surfing. But all of them seem like little kind of jokey anecdotes and not, there is one section, there's one little, some people have said, oh, what about sharks, and sharks have never been a problem for me, luckily. But there's this one little scene where I'm trying to push my girlfriend into waves in Hawaii, and some little black tips come by, and she doesn't see him, and I'm sort of panicked about it. So there's some marine life there in that scene. But there's also a thing, when we get to Tavarua, I had this sort of wealth of like, what should I write about? I had so much stuff, and I thought, 20, 30 pages, I can't go on for 200 pages. And I devoted a couple long paragraphs to, when there weren't waves, I did a lot of snorkeling and diving around in the reef. I have incredible reef there, not so incredible now with the resort and the reef's dying, and the sea level's rising and the water's getting warmer. But at that time, it was one of the most beautiful, probably the most beautiful coral reef I'd ever seen in my life, and with the amazing profusion of fish, most of which I couldn't name, but some of which I knew. So I write quite in detail about that reef and the fish and like the octopus that we could never seem to cook right, and the crabs and there's some marine life there. But I felt like it was most of the scenes I would have included, or the observations were just, they felt too jokey and tricky. I mean, like, ha, crab bit you. They just didn't have any heft to them. There's a couple whales go by, and that's a different feeling. And then those moments, I've surfed waves with, like this one place in South Africa, this happens now and then, with dolphins in the wave, like over and over, you're riding waves with dolphins surfing in front of you. It's like this incredible thing that very rarely, but occasionally happens. But that also felt corny. It felt like a calendar photo or something, and nah. So I had to leave out stuff. So. Maybe one more.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just curious, in writing a memoir about a sport, and in sport there is competition and knowledge and skill set. If you kind of like grappled with authenticity and the identity of what a surfer is, and if you could even define what a professional surfer is, and are you a professional surfer, and if you kind of how you grappled with that idea, or if you did.
I didn't too much, but it is there now that you mention it. That is, I'm writing from the point of view of a serious lifelong surfer, and there are a lot of us, and none of us were. I mean, a few of us were pros briefly at some time or other, but we were not professional surfers. We're not good enough, so there's I don't think I'd sort of emphasize it, but it's hard to surf. It's hard to learn to surf. And in general, I would say you need to learn as a little kid. I've never known anybody to get good at surfing who learned over the age of 14 or 15. You can get some basic competence on a bigger board or whatever, but to surf well, to be able to like think about what you want to do as opposed to like, am I going to fall off? You got to learn as a little kid. It's much harder than skiing. At that level, at some level, skiing is amazing, but at the sort of basic learning level. And I don't really belabor that, but everybody in the book who's a surfer qualifies. They're crummy, or they're good, or they're great, but they're over that threshold. And so there's that. And then, as I say, the world of professional surfing didn't really exist until fairly recently. There were great surfers, good surfers, famous surfers, but you couldn't really make a living at it. Now you can. And it's, it's funny. There isn't a big shelf of surf literature in this country, or any country really, but there are a lot of surfing books published, and a lot in Australia, and I didn't realize how many till my book came out, and it kept getting reviews with reviewers saying, this is not your ordinary surfer biography, and I thought, what is your ordinary surfer? There's no cocaine, there's no like highs, lows, crashed, rehab, all that stuff. Where is it, Where are the naughty bits? And I've never read any of these books and I've now become aware of them. Surfing is a kind of mainstream sport in Australia. Like famous surfers are famous in Australia, and are big athletic champions. And so each of them has to have at least one of these books out about how I got hit drugs and up, down, and backward. And my book was different, and they'd say, this is just for the ordinary bloke who spent this is some guy who spent his 20s under a palm tree, just like all of us spent our 20s under a palm tree. Because surfing's that mainstream, and I hadn't thought about it that way at all, but it is that. It's about the sort of people who surf seriously, but aren't, going to set the world on fire with their surfing. So, thank you all very, very much.
Thanks, sir.